Can we start it?
We start. Good. So we're having today a guest speaker and LAU senior student May Chokr. She's with us today to give us a short presentation about events that are unraveling in Syria. What are the various backgrounds of the Syrian uprising or the Syrian unrest, whatever you feel like describing it as. And to start perhaps a discussion on why what's happening in Syria and where perhaps these events may lead to eventually. So this is is it part of the Arab Spring, or is it part of the clash of civilization, as one may even describe situation in terms of sectarian conflict in Syria. So I'd like to thank you for being with us today, and we will have you speak, and eventually we will open up the floor for discussions.
Okay, great. Morning. I'm a former student of Dr. Salamey, as he said. Throughout different courses that we took, we were really able to sort of zoom in to the current happenings of the Arab Spring and trying to find different causes, different causes behind the Arab Spring, what's triggering the different countries for the people to revolt, and what sorts of dynamics of democratization and its process. We highlighted many various prominent elements, and of course in each country you have, different cases, such as Egypt and Libya. Syria, however, is, as we all know, very sensitive, and different factors weigh in, such as the military, the economy, the Ba'ath Party, and most importantly, the ethnic divisions. Religious divisions, and as well as the Assad family and the Mahmoud family and that. Now, the main important question to ask is whether Syria is reaching democratic change or a sectarian clash, or as the UN has recently stated that it's in a state of civil war. What's been taking place in the Arab world has expressed the deep frustration of people and long-term authoritarian regimes. And Syria has been marked with grave violence, and it's been a very long transitional phase, if that's what it is. It has caught a lot of the international attention and the Middle East as well. It's confronting tremendous commotions, a wide range of protesters. So to begin with, to discuss whether it's a democratic wave force or sectarian clash, we must understand why Syria is so problematic. Its opposition is portrayed with its consistent uniformity, but it's quite vague, which is why we're having this many questions, being raised. So hundreds of demonstrators and rebels take over the street, demanding their rights, and collectively against the Bashar al-Assad regime. Now, questions can arise as well, such as the role of the media, which we are seeing. You have the media that is with the protesters and that supports the Assad regime. So that also affects whether we are reaching a democratic wave, whether the people are gaining their rights and so on. Now, before I want to understand the ethnic divisions, I don't know if you can see it very well, but you can see over here where the Kurds are yes, and okay, to understand where the Alawis are. So mainly they are situated in this area, and many of the Sunni population is bypass going down. By the northeastern, you have the Kurds, closer to Turkey, and Syria is best known for its strong agricultural sector and oil and wheat fields and so on in the top area, which is where they actually gain their high economy from. And you have Christians, scattered, all around. I want to go through a quick timeline of what is taking place right now. So the nationwide uprising, the protests in Damascus, and the southern city of Daraa demanded the release of political prisoners, and security forces shot a number of people in Daraa, which obviously created this sense of grudge and rising anger. The government had some conciliatory measures in an attempt to dampen down the unrest. And eventually the army enters Daraa, which is when violence began. And the European Union tightened sanctions and began addressing the situation. Eventually the opposition organizes the many masses. And in July 2011, President Bashar al-Assad sacks down the governor of southern province in Hama after the mass demonstration there. So you start witnessing the clashes between the opposition and the government itself. In August 2011, U.S. President Obama and the allies asked Assad to step down, and eventually the Arab League suspends Syria because they failed to implement the Arab peace plan, and the UN pressure builds up. And then the Kofi Annan envoy was implemented, the 6-point plan. And at the moment, which is very recent actually, the 12th of June 2011, the United Nations declared that Syria is in a state of civil war. Now, certain mobilizing efforts also must be taken into consideration. Starting with the Tunisian Revolution, reaching to the Syrian right now, the media is definitely playing a prominent role. Facebook and Twitter and certain, many blogs. That was greatly seen in the Egyptian Revolution. The youth was playing a major role. And it is definitely in Syria at the moment, but of course because of the big danger that's taking place, it's caught up with the media. So you have two extreme sides. You don't have anything sort of in between, And yeah, not exactly. And both of the social medias, the two extreme sides, are a sense of communication between countries, but Syria at the moment is lacking this power, which was seen in the previous uprisings. Definitely the foreign intervention due to Syria's strategic position, so you don't have the NATO, for example, interfering as it did in Libya. The U.S. is very hesitant or very taking its sort of caution on the matter. Because of Syria's strategic positioning, the international intervention could be hazardous. So it's been delayed for many times, and they've sent the Annan envoy and so on. Intervention by the U.S. itself isn't taking place. however, this is why it's prolonged, the uprising prolonged so much. And definitely the European Union has obviously much to do with the US. The NATO is definitely seen as an attack, or, well, as invading of a force by the US or such. So that's why the organization hasn't said anything else. Now the situation varies when it comes to the European Union. France was among the first countries to denounce the acts of the Assad regime. And the French Minister of Foreign Affairs said very clearly that the country was in full support of Syrian opposition. Many Syrian activists are positive towards the EU, and many aren't as well, to take that into consideration. When it comes to the result of the sanctions that European Union has set, we must mention that Syrian oil represents about 25% of Syria's income, which is largely imported, around, say, 95% of the oil to the European Union. So of course, the EU has to address the situation thoroughly and be very precise. The United Nations has tried to pass the resolution to stop the violence, of course, through the Security Council, but it was vetoed by Russia and China and its oldest allies. Now, opinions towards Russia and China, of course, were mostly negative. However, if I go back on the map, many would say certain, because of the Alawite region is close to the Mediterranean, if any grave danger or mass heavy upheaval were to happen, the Russians have this tactic or strategy to be able to aid them through the Mediterranean Sea, according to some Syrian activists that I had seen. Now I want to go over the Turks are, you have a lot of Kurds up in the north, a lot of Alawites, and a big number of Alawi and Kurds up, but they have nothing to do with the ones that are in the northeast. Of course, for the Turks, it's best that the federation idea that's proposed, that's supposed to happen, for the Turks, it's obviously a negative for them, because the Kurds over here will want to, and Turkey will want to join, say, the Syrian, and then eventually, exactly, the Kurdish Turks, and eventually it will form a larger Kurdistan. And then Syria will be dissected. And as I said, for the Alawi, of course. And the Alawi of Turkey don't have much to do with the Syrian much. But because of the economy situated up in the northeast where the Kurds are, if Syria were to lose that half, Syria's economy will shrink massively. Yes, and of course there's Lebanon, which is also ethnically diverse and yeah. Now, up until now, the Assad regime has proven to withstand hundreds of protesters and mass demonstrations, of course, going on as an anti-Assad regime. To look at the situation from a broader sense, I wanted to speak briefly about the Huntington wave of democracy theory. Huntington spoke about the wave of democracy, or as well as say the snowballing effect or the domino effect, where each country will be influenced by the latter and will eventually gain democracy. Now there are different causes of the transition. Firstly, the legitimacy crisis of authoritarian regime, economic and military constraints, which is largely witnessed in Syria. The authoritarian regime is definitely seen, has a major role in people's masses' lives. Economic growth and education, expression of the middle class rather than just the lower class, which in my opinion also would play out in Syria, because education at the moment, say in such as Egypt, and the youth is educated. They are not oblivious to certain matters that come upon whether the middle class of Syria will succumb to the Assad regime or not. Of course, it's still unknown, but they do definitely play a role because they are sort of mobilizing with the opposition. Well, some may say not. I mean, of course, it depends on the political view. Now, changes of external actors' policies, as we said, the European Union, the U.S., not intervening, which makes it difficult for Syria. And the snowballing effect, like I said, and definitely the religious role in the transition, with promoting democratic values or not, such as the role of the Muslim Brotherhood or Al-Ikhwan in Syria, who have been suppressed or somehow, they haven't been in any power or any rule because of the Ba'ath Party. Had the Ba'ath Party come with power, legitimate power, of course things would differ, but how they had, according to some Syrians, how they had applied their power or their way of getting things done locally, domestically within the people, had obviously created a negative image to them, so people were forced to be with the Ba'ath Party. However,
I don't understand this word. Then we have
because there are a lot of Ikhwan in Syria, but they haven't been exactly. So if the opposition were to claim their victory, the religious role will play a role in a way that whether they will come to power within the Muslim Brotherhood, they are under a different umbrella, a different name. They're not exactly calling them the Muslim Brotherhood. There are various names, as a national
Syrian National Council.
Yeah, council, exactly. So if they were to hold on to their certain values, the issue with religion, such as what's happening right now in Egypt, is being addressed because you have, say, Morsi and Shafiq. The issue with Morsi is that they're afraid if he's too Islamic, will promote too much Islamic values and Sharia law, and the other. So
Tunisia, we have this religious role.
Yeah, same issues, but
Yeah.
it sounds like the Islamists in Tunisia took on extremely moderate
Yeah,
position.
very moderate.
Very moderate.
Rashid Ghannouchi.
So
Rashid Ghannouchi.
but in Syria, the situation was much more complicated
it's much more complicated, yeah.
because of too many different sectarian groups
Yeah,
that are
absolutely.
significant in size.
Absolutely.
Right?
Exactly, whether it's, the people have no other choice than to just, side with the Syrian Nationalist Council, or they will view it as the best model as it's seen in Tunisia or in Egypt probably right now. So this definitely is an important aspect to look at because it's being addressed in all of the other Arab revolutions. So if it will be addressed in Syria, it will definitely be more complex, and it will be a conundrum to face because of the different ethnicities. Yeah. Now, different causes for first wave, according to Huntington, weak democratic values among the elite who came to power originally, which are the Assad families here, which actually is true to this matter because we have seen the authoritarian regime eventually come to power.
You mean if the new elite, revolutionary elite, took over power, the unity will be a major issue of whether we're going to have a reverse.
Okay. Exactly. Just as I was, that's what I meant before, as the Assad came to power.
Oh, yes.
Now, of course, if you want to mention another cause of the reverse, would be definitely economic setbacks and disorder. Whether the emerging powers will be able to address this or not. Social and political polarization because of sectarian tension, which is very, very fragile and vulnerable at this moment in Syria, definitely. Class struggle because of long-standing struggle between the people. Political violence, we're seeing, and foreign intervention, definitely. So
these goals will
stay or not. I mean, this will sort of hold on to the democratization process.
Determine the fate of the revolution if it was to emerge victorious. So then the post-Assad regime fate will be determined by these determinants.
And I mean, in my opinion, it's very easy at the moment when we look at Syria. They are found there, so you definitely have political violence. You definitely have maybe weak democratic values. Will Syria be able to hold those on the long term? That's the question. That's what many writers are addressing. So I want to go through the three. Well, there are three, say, possibilities for Syria's future that are being talked about. Firstly, if the government would claim its victory, it's a probability of many Syrian activists that are, well, I don't know if they're pro-Assad but say it would happen. The next probable solution would be the federation that a lot of people are talking about, or the sort of dissecting all of Syria.
So we're talking about first scenarios.
Scenarios, right?
One scenario, the regime will win.
The regime would win.
What will they do if they win?
If they win, definitely there's the federation issue. So
the federation option would be for the regime.
Yes. Yeah.
And
the third is complete anarchy. They call it the Asfuri if the regime would win. Then the third is al-Asfuri, according to also Syrian activists.
What is called?
Al-Asfuri.
Asfuri? What does that mean?
It's complete anarchy. So as soon as the borders with Lebanon, I mean, definitely Hamas over here.
Al-what?
Asfuri.
Anarchy. So you see Hamas.
خلينا من الأول.
Definitely, if you have Iraq over here, borders with Jordan, Lebanon as well. So it signals extreme ethnic divisions and just extreme, if say, probable spillover, which we're all talking about right now, were to happen, different actors will weigh in, and then the Kurds will seek help, the Alawites will start to say retreat to their area, and the Christians will be sort of scattered. Now, the fate of Christians, according to Syrian Christians themselves, that they have no place in Syria. They sort of lost hope, or do not see a promising future for their existence. If it were to be dissected, say, in a federation, of course the Alawites will be in this area with part of Hamas. So you can see the north and
صعب فيها.
فيتو نظام العلوات
جبل محسن
so
تركيا.
Say there was complete anarchy, that's the final system, right? So the Alawi will definitely be concentrated over here. It'll be easier for them. I mean, they never really had permanent allies. Syria never had permanent, long-standing allies. But if they were to help them, the Mediterranean Sea is obviously open and it's easy access for them. However, for others, such as the Sunni, they would look at it as they'll obviously be concentrated around, well, the center and going down as well to the Rico Dimash. So they would see it as sort of blocking or blockading the Alawites over here because they have the ocean on their left. So
And then you're going to have a fluid situation, especially on the borders of Lebanon and
yeah,
Iraq.
definitely.
You will have
And Jordan as well.
And Jordan.
Definitely. And of course you have the issue with the Kurds, with the Turkish Kurds and the Syrian Kurds.
So this is a kind of a federal perception of possible Syria. And by the way, it was unthought of in Iraq before. But now you're reminding me about what happened in Iraq. Eventually, the provisions, these were called provisions, these are provisions in Syria, different provisions.
Exactly, autonomous.
Kind of autonomous. In Iraq, under the new federal constitution, it says if 3 of these different provisions, they have 18 there, if through a referendum, 3 decided by majority votes, popular majority, wanted to come together and form a federation, they could do so. And this is how the Kurdish Federation in northern Iraq was established and was formalized. And eventually now we're talking about possible Sunni federation and possible Shia federation in Iraq.
It's not yet a federation, but
It's only now Kurdish Arabic.
Kurdish Arabic.
There are no other 3 provinces came together. There is a federation. Now we're talking about a similar scenario here. But the issue in Syria is more complicated by the fact of what May just mentioned, that sectarian groups very scattered around. I mean, other than maybe the Alawi, to some extent on the sea shore, may be able to be concentrated. Otherwise, it's really a Asfuria, you mentioned?
Asfuria, yeah, according to Syrian.
Otherwise, it's Asfuria. And considering the countries around, especially Lebanon, northern part of Lebanon, Sunni Christian, it would be very fluid situation. Iraq on the east side. That would be really interesting development.
Yeah.
See.
The Sunni, obviously, this is the largest population, they will be centered along the center and the northern part. The Kurds will take the northeast, Alawi, and, well, according to some Syrians, the southern part will be of whoever, like the minorities. So
Sunni Darzi.
Sunni, yeah, there are a lot of Druze down in
Suwaid.
yes. And yeah, it will be many minorities, which is including the Christians. The Christians don't see, as I said, promise in the future. And the issue of Israel at the moment, many would say that they do not see an issue with Israel at the moment.
It's not the main.
It's not the main issue. Their enemy is Assad, and Israel is, or was a complete waste of, yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
So this is interesting scenario, but this is not necessarily because the opposition is not calling for federal state.
No, definitely
everybody is now calling about united Syria. But still, I mean, if the sectarian dynamic persisted, it seems eventually we may lie back to either a Lebanese model, which is a moderated form of federalism, or a stronger model, Iraqi model.
The recent model now is Lebanization of the
Lebanization.
Arab
It's
world.
more of a consolidation of sectarian.
Syria, everywhere.
Right.
Lebanon.
Yes.
So basically, the fate of Syria is unknown.
US.
I mean, those are the probable solutions or talked about scenarios that may take place or not. But as I mentioned, why it's such a complex issue is because of the ethnic divisions, and it's situated on a large scale, not as Lebanon, because Lebanon is relatively smaller, of course. So you have masses and a large population to deal with, whether the federation were to be applied. Will it be successful? Will it fail? Will complete anarchy or Australia would be, I mean, drag along other regional countries? It's all a question, definitely. But yeah, these are the main issues that are being addressed. Yes.
All right. Okay. Very nice and very insightful to our discussion about the Arab Spring. And definitely what appears to be a simple, straightforward process, like the Tunisian
Yeah, that was
type, is really, when we look at the situation in Syria, it's much more complex and complicated, and invite us to think much deeper into what kind of revolutionary path the opposition may take if it was to succeed, and or what kind of consortiation or consensus to be reached if there were to be a political conference between the opposition and the regime, and what kind of future Syria we are to imagine impose if we are to replace the current regime with an alternative one. What kind of Syria? And all these are relevant issues to be discussed and to be examined, because we can't just speak about revolution as, you know, a tourist kind of travel. It is very, very, and this is why we are political scientists in international affairs. We have to think about these and present realistic scenarios, and scenarios that will eventually lead to a right path that benefits the people of Philly as a whole. So we will continue this discussion, and would like to have your opinions and or questions to respond to.
What I wanted to say regarding the opposition and the regime united or having consensus. On the level of the opposition, we see that the opposition now are divided and are not united. So how can we imagine a unity between opposition and the regime? I think it's so far now, so hard to reach.
So the gap.
Opposition between themselves are not united.
So
And
that's
are-
one.
And having a deep division between them. So how can you imagine a unity or a consensus between regime and the opposition?
Well, this is why the federation is being talked about, because you have so many different divisions and so many different ethnicities that are causing the divisions, or the divisions themselves within the opposition. So, I mean, the federation would be, I think, a solution, whether it's long-term or temporarily. It would address these different divisions. I mean, that's again the main issue with Syria. It will definitely always be divided, and and yeah, this is definitely an issue to talk about.
So now the opposition is divided, right? And so the formal position is that the regime, if the regime was to negotiate political settlement, who to negotiate with and on what ground. And this is, I think,
The regime invited the opposition for negotiations. Yes, President Assad said.
So even the opposition is not that comprehensive. There's the internal position and the outside opposition, but
right.
no link between the.
But I think what May is saying here, let's assume, that's for a second, that the opposition, by all its different brands and differences, they came together to sit with the regime and discuss the future of Syria. What kind of Syria we want. We definitely know, based on what May has been presenting, that the major component of any discussion in Syria and its future will be sectarian. How the different sectarian groups are going to coexist. Are they going to federalize? Or are they not going to federalize? If they're not going to federalize, what kind of power structure we will be having? And if we are to federalize, what kind of, not only power structure to have, but what kind of consequences to reckon with? There is, I think, everyone is convinced, including the regime, Bashar al-Assad after the referendum over the constitution, everyone convinced that business as usual is no longer a possibility. A one-party rule, centralized government, everyone is convinced that we have to restructure. So I think this is what we really need to think about or discuss. First, how to restructure ethnicities. You mentioned the Lebanization. Is the Lebanization formula viable? Is the Iraqi federalization viable?
I don't think that.
And third, perhaps, I mean, we always have not presented a third possible model, and that's the secular model. The secular plural, not the secular Ba'ath style. Secular plural, more like the US style.
That's would be.
But no one is ready to go to this.
What do you think?
No one is ready to go to a secular solution. I think concerning the Lebanization of the Syrian problem, or to implement the Lebanese solution like the Ta'if one, I think it wouldn't be a working one because it was implemented to a certain extent in Iraq, where the power sharing was divided among the Iraqis based on the sectarian division. And still it's not working. We have the political
dynamic.
Yes, it's, every now and then it stopped, and even still every 2-3 days we have car bombs there. So it didn't work not on the political side, not neither on the security side. So the same issue will be in Syria after this big amount of blood in Syria.
Okay.
I think we are going to the Asforiki. Yeah.
Because
each party is or each side wants to claim victory.
Okay.
No one will accept any kind of negotiation of power sharing.
Let me perhaps we'll go in a round discussion. Let's go with Joseph. What do you think, Joseph, is the best political model or the political power structure that the Syrian can perhaps have and will be either transitional or sustainable?
If we look into the point that this point is just a basic technical problem that you have, we neglect the point that we don't have any. We neglect the point that we don't have any economic problems and we don't have any socio-political problem. We just face it as an ethnic problem. We just have to reconstruct the regime in Syria based on a power sharing based on ethnicity, saving all minorities. And today's constitution in Syria does not save any minorities, and neither the Kurds nor the Alawite, nor just by a Ba'ath party, and one regime party, neglected any ethnicity. So this is one point that we may be taking as a associational democracy, if you'd like to say it, saving all minorities and power sharing, and saving even the, not only power sharing, the resources. Yani, if you want to go to the fuel and resources of Syria, the oil sector in Syria, it have to be even, yani, if you will be going to the paradigm of having this kind of federalization, you have several states will be weak, other states will have more, not states,
more resources.
Resources will be more into, they will have more into oil, and other states, Damascus and Damascus didn't have not any resources of oil, whereas the oil is being paid outside. So to a point, federalization cannot be a solution, because if each one of them will be saying what's the women's side for me, I'll be losing the oil, I'll be losing the seaside. If I'll be going to the Alawite side, I'll be losing the seaside. I'll be squeezed in the middle between, if I'm taking the part of Homs and the part of Deir Zur and Hasaka upstairs. So we have not any resources. I don't have an expert on.
So you have provinces, the consequences of federalism.
Yes.
There's one province that could be wealthy, and
another one will be very poor, and we don't have
so
any.
So you're going to end up having kind of
not a fair distribution.
Fair share.
Not a fair
maybe
share.
A province-to-province war. A province-to-province war.
Yeah.
So which is not very. If you're going to a solution, it's not a solution.
Right.
So probably those are major two dilemmas that we'd like to take into consideration: minority and ethnicity, and the distribution of resources in Syria.
Okay, very good. Really nice what you said. And actually, many European countries like that.
Yeah.
And Germany is a federal regime with a strong centralized state. It's a combination of decentralization and centralization. Now, perhaps.
But federation there is not based on sectarian division.
Not sectarian, but here you're not only serving sectarian, you are preserving minorities. You can just check in your out minorities like Christians are not anymore within the constitution. Not are dissolving place by place. So if you're not throwing this way of adopting this constitution, you will be losing several minorities.
That's federal. I think that any kind of regime that will be established in Syria is better than this one after. So I think that it's a step forward for democracy. And further democracy will need time to be implemented.
What kind? That's the question.
The easy part.
Yeah, that's the easy part. The regime is bad.
Concerning the federalism, I don't see it. There will be provinces that will be more working than others, but it will always exist the centralized state, the centralized government, which can make the distribution of this wealth fairly to all. So federalism does not contradict the central power of the government.
I see.
It's not independent provinces.
Right.
According to sex, according to sex, it could be opposing to the
You need to have a powerful government also. Centralized and federalism. Both of them.
And we're talking about federalism more on regional basis rather than sectarian basis.
We talk about federalism so that clashes don't exist. And the fair distribution of resources.
Okay.
And with
Manage.
exactly, and with central power, that perhaps in the future, when they see that the provinces are really getting well in the communication between each other, they can be more models for the federalism.
So in a centralized government, it could be established in a Lebanese model,
Controlling.
like sectarian quotated
Centralized shouldn't be
seats.
sectarian, and my motto is centralized shouldn't be sectarian. Federalism can be sectarian.
Okay. So the federal states or provinces may be sectarian oriented.
The way of living, the way of
Oh,
this
on a local
on a
level.
local level, exactly.
Yeah.
The powerful centralized authority.
But
Oh.
the
Like
fear
a
is,
secular, like a secular.
Yeah.
the fear is